afternoon, and thank you for tuning into WatchGeekTime. This is the WatchGeekTime podcast. It's a conversation about heritage, history, and why we're so hooked on horology. So sit back, relax. We're going to talk about everything from watches to watches. If it's Saturday, give us a call toll-free 800-POD-TIME. That's 1-800-766-8463. The Watch Geek Time podcast is recorded live on Saturdays from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Also stream live at WatchGeekTime.com and on Apple TV. I am your host and resident Watch Geek, Scott Goldman. As always on the boards is Jody.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Hello, Jody. We talking in third person now?
Third person?
Thanks for having us. I like that third person thing. Jody, I notice you're wearing your...
Oh, my Speedmaster.
Yeah, you're speedy.
I thought I'd pull that out today.
You're very nice.
A mega mood.
I have my perpetual calendar on, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
I want to hear about it.
We're going to talk about that. So, a little programming note coming up Tuesday night, March 1st, is the Purist Pro dinner sponsored by Jager LeCoultre. So, if you haven't already put in your RSVP, it might be a good idea to jump online and email Leo at JagerLeCoultre.com. I understand we'll be treated to some new pieces like the anniversary Reverso line. Anniversary Reverso. It's like the 65th anniversary of the Reverso. Yeah, it's cool. I like that. The Reverso was designed for pussy polo players. Didn't want to scratch the fronts of their watch. Anyways, I'm looking forward to seeing there's some nice pieces that they did. And whenever Jager LeCoultre does like retro pieces, they always do a really nice job. So, being February, it is perpetual calendar month. And being a leap year, it's actually perpetual calendar year. So, we'll talk just for a second about a perpetual calendar.
Tell me, because I'm curious about, does your watch know when it's a leap year?
It does. That's a true perpetual calendar.
Okay.
So, if you're looking at my watch right now, you'll notice that it says Saturday, February 27th, and there's even a date display or a year display, that says 2016. So it knows tomorrow is February 28th.
Right.
And it knows that Monday is February 29th. And then it knows that Tuesday is March 1st.
Right.
And it's all mechanical. It's fine. I mean, you know what? This, I guess this Citizen perpetual calendar repeater, it has a chip in it.
Right.
You'd expect
it's programmed in there.
Exactly.
But to mechanically build that into a machine,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And here's a G-Shock.
Right.
Same thing. It knows.
Yeah.
I guess it's. I don't really want to call it a perpetual calendar unless it truly knows.
Right.
And it's mechanical.
Yeah.
Now, there is one other type of calendar. It's called a secular calendar. And it actually knows that every 100 years, there is no leap year. They call it the leap year correction.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The problem solving that certain watchmakers go through, it's pretty amazing.
That is incredible.
And speaking of which, I know we have spoken, you and I, off air about the great George Daniels, but his Martian watch, or really I believe what he calls his astronaut's watch, just recently sold at auction for $2.5 million. It's a pocket watch. Yeah. And on one side, it's a perpetual calendar. And it tells the time on Earth, and it tells the day, the date, the year. It's just an astounding piece of handcraft.
Wow.
And on the other side, it's a perpetual calendar, but it's as if you lived on Mars. So it's keeping track of the Martian day and the Martian hours.
Wow. Was that a one-off, or was there a series that were
absolute one-off.
Oh wow!
All of his watches were one-offs. So any watch that George Daniels made with his own hands, first of all, he had to like you. He didn't just make a watch for you.
Right.
And
it did the Martian Soul.
The Martian Soul.
Right.
You're exactly right.
Wow.
You know, that was something interesting that I found out just recently. Every planet has its own name for a day.
Oh, wow.
So our day is called a day. The Martian day is called a soul. And so on. It's really quite astounding. Wow. You know, the Martian day is very similar to ours. If we both started out at noon, let's say on January 1st, about a month later, it would be noon here, but 11 a.m. there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Their day's a little bit longer.
Right.
Their soul is a little bit longer than our day. Very interesting, yeah. I'd love to check Mars out, though. I love that movie, Martian. Did you like The Martian?
I enjoyed it. It was a good watch, yeah.
It's really interesting how time plays such a sensitive part of the storyline, and how he only has so much time and so much ration.
Yeah.
And here we are on the Watch Geek time. Time is everything.
That's right.
Without time, there's no show.
Exactly.
Okay. So, if you're signed up for the dinner at Jaeger LeCoultre on Tuesday, March 1st, and you're wearing a perpetual calendar, I expect to see you with it on your wrist. You know, it's funny. I was in the boutique the other day picking up a buckle, and Leo says, "Are you bringing your girlfriend?" I said, "Yeah, but she won't take her Rolex off." He's like, "Oh, that's okay. That's okay." I went, "Yeah, sure. You think it's okay." All right. So it is perpetual calendar month, and I'm not going to stay up and watch this thing turn over.
I was just going to say, here's Scott at midnight watching his watch.
Well, that's the interesting thing is almost no perpetual calendars do a full turnover. Because think about that. It has to advance 2 calendar days without touching the day of the week, the phase of the moon. This one also tracks the phase of the moon.
Right.
So it's got a very interesting mechanism whereby it starts the process at 3 a.m. is my understanding.
Wow.
I'm not going to be awake for it. I'm not. Okay, so as we alluded to last week, today's show is going to focus on what we believe to be the top 10 major brands in luxury watchmaking, and how and why these brands made the top 10. There's not so much a criterion. I think it'll be obvious to our listeners why we picked the top, at least top 9, and we'll leave the 10th spot up for anybody to interpret or decide what they want to do with it. But we're going to talk about the top 10 brands, and we'll get into a couple of independent watch brands, or watchmakers, I should say, because independent watchmakers aren't really brands unless you're Peter Speak Marin and you've just become a brand.
Right.
Yeah. But I've always felt, to me, the independents are far more exciting than any of the major brands.
Right.
And, you know, I have watches from many different brands, including Rolex and Omega, as do you. And it's fine. I think as collectors, it's good to have different brands in your quiver.
Yeah.
But as you've seen, like my Hob Ring, which is an independent brand, and my friends Keaton Myrick, which is just a stunner, it's really interesting to have something from these guys.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
And they started off with a hunk of metal.
Oh, yeah. Handmade is just incredible. I think that's just wonderful. There's something far above some of these mass-produced watches that just gives them some authenticity. It's beautiful.
It's true artisan stuff. Jody's pushing the pot on the... Well, you know what I mean. He's pushing the board. All right, so when the Watch Time theme comes up, that tells me it's sponsor time on the Watch Geek Time. We'll be right back after these words from the man. And remember, you never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely hold on to it for the next generation.
Family. Heritage is history. Your history. And time conspires like mechanical perfection. Unique moments in time building together. Fragments of tradition emerging for eternity across generations. Patek Philippe. For every moment in life.
There is a watchmaking standard that is revered around the world. That standard comes from Rolex. From clasp to bracelet to its unique watertight oyster case, a Rolex holds its value because it was intended to. Crafted from just 3 precious metals, platinum, steel, and gold, each defies the ordinary. Its steel, 904L, virtually indestructible and corrosion resistant, is incomparable. Its patented Ever Rose Gold, created in an exclusive foundry, will remain beautiful for life. Inside, a genuine Rolex movement is a product of superiority and remarkable testing. It is unrivaled. At Rolex, flawless standards create more than a watch. They create a value that was meant to endure. For a complete selection of Rolex timepieces, visit your official Rolex jeweler.
Available at Lux, Bond, and Green Jewelers, Westport, Greenwich, and other locations throughout Connecticut and Massachusetts, where every box has a story.
Welcome back to Watch Geek Time. Our number is 800-POD-TIME. That's 1-800-766-8463. The Watch Geek Time podcast is recorded live on Saturdays from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Time. We're also streamed live at WatchGeekTime.com and on Apple TV. I am your host and Watch Geek, Scott Goldman. My buddy, fellow Watch Geek is
Jody.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, Jody. So, before the break, we were alluding to the fact that we were going to talk about what we thought were the top 10 watch brands, or really, to be more specific, the top 10 major luxury watchmaking brands. We'll talk about some independents towards the end of the conversation, but first, let's just define luxury watchmaking. A luxury watch is now defined as any timepiece that sells retail for $1,700 US.
It's good to know. I never knew that.
So anything over $1,600 Swiss, essentially around the world,
is deemed a luxury
timepiece. And it's very interesting, the Swiss franc, and I urge our listeners to definitely go and learn a little bit more about money exchange and money policy, especially that of the euro and its relation to the CHF, the Swiss franc. I don't think the British pound plays much of a role, but for sure, the Swiss franc and the euro have this ongoing battle, and second to none is our US dollar, obviously. And one thing that happened recently was the Swiss government put a cap on what the euro could be worth against the Swiss franc. One thing you'll see when we go to Switzerland for Basel, it's very interesting. You'll see on the bill, when we sit down and we have 2 beers and 2 finger sandwiches, and the bill is $50 or 50 Swiss. It doesn't matter if you're paying with euros, it's still 50 euros. And 50 euros is worth more than 50 Swiss. So they don't.
Right.
Essentially, the Swiss don't recognize the euro as being worth anything more than. Anyway, so it's got a lot of European retailers very concerned. And of course, it's got a lot of Swiss watchmakers very concerned.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, sort of outside the scope of the conversation. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Here are what we believe to be the top 10 brands, all of which sell for way, way more than $1,700. Of course, at the top of the list, you have Rolex. Rolex is sort of that mad cult brand in my mind. You know, everybody wants a Rolex.
It was interesting. I remember you telling me that they're a currency internationally.
I think that's what's most special about the Rolex is if you bought a Rolex for $8,000 or $9,000 today and you were in trouble somewhere in the world, somebody somehow will give you $6,000 for it.
Right.
Which, as opposed to the next member of our top 10, Patek Philippe, sure, you can go out and spend $35,000 on a Patek, and somebody somewhere is willing to give you $6,000 for it.
Right.
So yeah, I think the Rolex, just the brand itself, is considered an incredible power, and the name obviously is known the world over.
Right.
So Rolex, Patek Philippe, Jager LeCoultre, Cartier, Long & Sona, Omega, Vacheron Constantin, Ulysses Nardin, Breguet. Not in any special order, although Rolex, I think, has a special place. I think Patek Philippe obviously has a very special place in heritage and history, as do Jager LeCoultre, Long & Sona. Cartier is maybe one of the most fantastic brands and oldest brands, along with Vacheron Constantin. You know, Vacheron Constantin was founded on an island in the middle of the Lake Genève, and it's still there.
Wow.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Ulysses Nardin, I've always found to be an amazing marine-driven watch, and their timepieces are very beautiful, yet very rugged. They do some really exciting things as a really, essentially an independent up until recently.
Mm.
They have done some beautiful watchmaking at Ulysses Nardin. It's a brand I don't own a piece of, but I think the more I look at it, there is a particular watch I'm drawn to. I'll show it to you off air.
Right.
Okay. So we talked about Jager LeCoultre last week. We know why they make the list. Cartier, long history of watchmaking. We know why they make the list. Long & Sona I find to be fascinating. One of the greatest German watch manufacturers in the world, actually known as Saxony watchmaking. Saxon. Dresden was very badly damaged during World War II.
Right.
And this beautiful factory was damaged, and the grandson of Adolf Lang had a dream to open the factory back up one day. And of course, as we know, the wall came down between East and West Germany, and Richard Lang went at it. And he saw his grandfather's dream come true, and he opened the factory back up. And these watches, to me, this is my personal holy grail. There's a couple of pieces from Long & Sona we'll talk about next week when we cover.
It's great. I that interview you showed me a while back. It was beautiful, that timepiece we were looking at. It's really nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Well, they just came out with their own deadbeat second-hand watch,
Right.
just like their sister company, Jager LeCoultre. You know, it's interesting, as we talked about last week, they're both owned by Richemont.
Right.
And that jump second that they came up with that detente escapement,
Yeah.
fantastic. Is it detente or remontoire?
Detente.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because there's all these escapements in my head. I was talking about this grasshopper escapement. An amazing article came down about John Harrison, who we all know is the great chronometer inventor and saved a lot of lives with his chronometer. And he figured it all out. But there was this paper he wrote very long time ago about he knew he could make a clock that would be accurate to less than a second a month.
Wow.
And it used a grasshopper escapement. So I've heard grasshopper, remontoire, free sprung, happy this, ding dang that. My head's spinning. So, anyway, some of the alternates that you and I talked about should make the list. Audemars Piguet. Now, Audemars Piguet, now famous for Royal Oak, which we all know is a Gerald Genta designed watch, just like the Nautilus. Sharp-edged, octagonal shape. Hublot uses a very similar design, also by Gerald Genta. Made famous probably by Arnold. Get to the chopper! Arnold probably made Audemars Piguet very famous when they put his namesake on the watch. So it's a very similar story to Panerai with Stallone, as we spoke of last week, how the movie star wears a watch and people flip out and it becomes famous.
Right.
It's also very interesting to note that Audemars Piguet is the owner of Renault Poppy. Now, Renault Poppy is more of a watchmaking studio in that they make watches for a lot of other people. Vianney Halter's Spaceship. Vianney Halter is a independent watchmaker.
Right.
They made that watch. The guys from Grubel and Forsey, who we're going to talk about actually next week, they are from Renault Poppy. So it's somewhat ironic that one of the great brands, Audemars Piguet, with one of the great histories, also owns this really cool avant-garde studio of watchmaking geniuses called Renault Poppy. So Audemars Piguet could take the 10th spot. Of course, Zenith, the great Zenith, whose El Primero might be one of the great chronograph movements next to the Valjoux 72.
They're nice.
They're very nice. I think Glajuta could make the 10th spot. And I might go out on a limb here. I don't want to get spanked, but Seiko? No. Mechanically, some of the great watches you'll ever see. The Grand Seiko line, Jody, c'est magnifique. Very beautiful.
You'll have to show me. Would love to see it.
Yeah. And as one of our guests from a previous show showed us, they do some really nice stuff. The Grand Seiko High Beat, very accurate and quite fantastic. So,
It's that time.
Jody, are you pushing pot on me?
I'm pushing this fader up right now.
Oh, that sounds like the Watch Geek Time podcast theme song. That means we got to give the man his due. Well, folks, it's a conversation about heritage, history, and why we're all hooked on horology. It's Watch Geek Time. We're going to step aside for, 60 seconds, 90 seconds? How long are these? All right, we'll be right back. 60. You should know.
There are movements so perfect, you'd hardly think they were made by humans.
Break it out. Let's go.
Gotta get the dodo.
Scandalous. Warden, 2 boys going for a stroll.
Release the hounds.
My spleen!
Now what? It didn't work.
Hit him with the Kenny G.
Oh, I love this song.
Focus.
Lancaster, no! It's a trap!
Nonsense. My father owned one.
My goodness, I've been hoodwinked.
Welcome back to Watch Geek Time. I am your resident watch geek, Scott Goldman. As always, with me on the boards is
It's Jody.
Jody. If it's Saturday between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. Pacific time, give us a call at 800-POD-TIME. That's 1-800-766-8463. We'll take your call. All right. Before we went away on our break, we were talking about the top 10 major brands, major luxury brands. Now we should really, for just a quick sec, talk about some of the real top-end independent brands.
That'd be nice.
The top guy for, I think, just about everybody, to be realistic, is a guy named Kari Voutilainen. And it's a name most people won't know. But he's a Finnish guy, Finnish meaning from Finland, and Kari, K-A-R-I, Voutilainen, V-O-U-T-I-L-A-I-N-E-N, Voutilainen.ch. This man is making some of the most beautiful watches you've ever seen in your life.
Nice.
The dials do not say Swiss made. They say handmade.
Nice.
I've been to his
Okay.
shop. It smells like oil. What can I tell you?
Where is his shop based?
It's in a town called Motier in Switzerland. Motier, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. M-O-T-I-E-R-S, Motier. It's a quaint little town. There's another watchmaker there, Beauvais,
Okay.
which is a watchmaker making pocket watches that convert to wrist watches and vice versa. Beautiful stuff. Some of the other high-end, most sought-after independent, I call them horologers. They're true artisans, actually, preserving this craft. Ludovic Balleward, maker of the Upside Down and the Halftime, absolutely fantastic.
I think it'd be beautiful to see these shops, these workshops that these guys work out of.
You'd be
Maybe.
surprised. They're smaller than you think. Kari's is a little bit larger. He produces about 30 to 35 watches a year.
Okay.
But his shop is actually half of his house. His home exists on one half, and the atelier exists on the other half.
Now, on that level, that to me is true handmade. That's not mass produced. I mean, it's coming out of something in someone's backyard. That's just wonderful.
It's unbelievable, actually. Yeah. And he just recently bought a dial factory. So what he's turning out is truly fantastic. Again, Voutilainen.ch. I recommend you go there. Some of the other guys I just mentioned, Ludovic Balleward, Philip Dufour, some of the top stuff in the world. Roger Smith, who is really the heir apparent to the George Daniels mantle. George Daniels is the grandfather of independent watchmaking.
Okay.
And again, he mastered all the disciplines, which was not just making the movement, but he made the case, he made the crystal, he made the everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking everything.
Right.
Truly fantastic stuff.
That's great.
You got my buddy Keaton Myrick out of Sisters, Oregon. Shout out to Keaton. Great American watchmaker. Watch out, because the Americans are coming at you. You got my friend Dirk Dornbluth a German guy, Saxony watchmaking. You have to kind of take a leap of faith if you don't want to necessarily get a Swiss watch.
Right.
It's interesting. The Germans are very capable. My friends, the Habrings, and you've seen my Foy Durante with the jumping seconds. Fantastic. Independent watchmaking is very exciting, and that'll just lead us into the next part of this show where we talk about the history of a couple brands, that today being Rolex and Patek Philippe. Alfred Davis is actually the true founder of Rolex, unbeknownst to many who think it's Hans Wilsdorf, but it was the brother-in-law of Hans Wilsdorf, Alfred Davis, who founded Rolex with Wilsdorf, which would actually become Rolex SA in London. It was an English company originally. And their whole approach was to make the most high-quality cases made, accompanied with the most high-quality movements made. But they allowed the jewelers themselves to put their own names on the dial. So, for instance, you could find a Tiffany and Company watch, Tiffany and Co., but it was made by Rolex.
Oh, okay.
In 1908, Wilsdorf, Hans Wilsdorf, registered the name Rolex and opened an office in Le Chaux de Fonds. That's in Switzerland. Great little town. Some of the greatest museums are found in Le Chaux de Fonds. Carrie's not far from there. Motier is right outside of Le Chaux de Fonds.
Okay.
It was registered, the name, on November 15th, 1915. And there is no rule of thumb. There's no meaning. Nobody truly knows what Wilsdorf was thinking, but apparently Rolex is one of those rare words which is the same everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You just say Rolex,
and you know what it is.
People know.
Yeah. Actually, very, very smart marketing. When I've looked at them over the years, that they're embedded into every culture, everywhere.
It's some of the best marketing on the planet.
Yeah.
It's just some of the best going. And Wilsdorf understood that early on when he was anxious to get his watch onto the wrist of the Oyster. He wanted to get, let me start that again. Wilsdorf was very anxious to get his Oyster watch on the wrists of these Olympic swimmers. And this one particular Olympic swimmer who swam the English Channel with the Oyster perpetual watch on.
Right.
So he was very in tune with how to market his watches, which was very clever even back then. Funny thing about Rolex, there's a lot of history to them, and again, we could go on to what happened with how they developed the Deep Sea and the Submariner and the GMT and all the other fantastic watches that go along with solving problems for pilots and the anti-magnetic watches, etc.
Yeah.
They were very involved with charity. So it's interesting that Rolex is actually a .org. They're a not-for-profit organization. The Wilsdorf Foundation, a lot of people don't know this. Every extra penny that is left over after the year goes to the Wilsdorf Foundation for Children.
That's great.
It's a great charity, one of the biggest in the world. Anyways, clearly a status symbol, a mad cult brand, as if you heard me many times refer to it. And blingity, bling, bling, bling. Second brand we're going to touch upon is Patek Philippe, one of the great brands in the world, founded by Polish watchmaker Antoni Patek back in 1839. And it's been in Geneva ever since. And he started it with his partner, Japek. So they used to be called Patek and Japek. And it wasn't until 1845 that Patek joined with the great French watchmaker Adrien Philippe. He was the inventor of the keyless winding mechanism, by the way.
Nice.
And that's when they became Patek Philippe and Company, founded in 1851. Now, Patek has a lot of really cool stuff to its name. Ironically, this month, which I call Perpetual Calendar Month, and in this case, Perpetual calendar year because it's a leap year and I get to see my watch do all kinds of great things. Patek Philippe is the one, the watchmaking company that figured out the perpetual calendar. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Some of the best, actually. They also came up with the split seconds hand chronograph. Now, what that is if you think about a race, if you're timing, I don't know, horses, let's say, you want to be able to find out what the timing was at one marker, and then you want to find out the timing at another marker. So how many seconds to the quarter mile, how many seconds to the half mile.
Right.
Patek Philippe pioneered the use of these split second hands that would actually stop at one point and another hand would continue on. So it had more than two hands to track time. Very, very nice. One of the complications in a rattrapante, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So it was 1976, the brand really exploded onto the scene when they introduced the Nautilus collection. It was considered a sports watch. It was designed, of course, by Gerald Genta. And the rest, as they say, is history. Patek's a very popular brand. Prices generally start about $35,000 to join the club, but it's one of those very amazing brands that's been owned by the same family since basically about 1925, 1926. Pretty fantastic, actually. The Stern family, now run by Theory Stern, who's my favorite Neppet, as I like to say. I hope hope nobody's listening. Anyways, he likes to listen to the minute repeaters. That's what he does all day because you never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely hold on to it for the next generation. Oh, Jody.
Sorry. It's that time.
We got to pay the man.
I'm watching the clock.
All right. Thank you for listening to Watch Geek Time. We're going to step aside one last time to pay the man. We'll be right back for more watch talk on WatchGeekTime.com, Apple TV, 800 Pod Time. Welcome back to Watch Geek Time. I am your host, Scott Goldman. On the board is Jody.
Hey.
Jody, we're going to wrap up the conversation today. We're going to talk about the Apple Watch and some other smartwatches. You were asking me something about the break. Curious, what is your take on the Apple Watch? And then I'll give you mine, and then we'll talk about some of the others.
I was thinking about that. I mean, for a useful purpose, maybe they're good in a corporate world. Maybe. How
so?
I think if you want updates and you don't want to be pulling out your phone, or if you've received something or you're waiting on something, it may be good for that luxury in a corporate business world. But I often wonder, do those kind of people actually have beautiful timepieces and wear them?
Do they?
Yeah.
I wonder.
Because I believe people who have had beautiful timepieces probably would refuse to wear that kind of thing.
Well, I think the people who are wearing Apple Watches were not necessarily watch wearers to begin with. Or I'll be more specific. They weren't watch purists.
Yeah.
I don't want to come off snobby, but I'm sure I am.
I agree.
I'm sure I am because I think I'll just say right out, as a watch geek, I'm sure I'm a watch snob. I don't think there's any question, but I feel very proud when a friend of mine comes to me and says, I'd like to get something special for my husband or say my wife, and they like this and they like that, and I'm curious of their budget and where we can go, and it gives me great pleasure to bring them along.
Right.
if an Apple Watch is what somebody wants, I would never say don't have it.
Right.
But I don't fancy them a watch person to begin with.
Yeah.
I think if you still need your phone in your pocket for the watch to work, it's weird to me.
Yeah.
But one other thing with the Apple Watch that I find troubling, in the Apple landscape, whether it's an iPad or back in the day an iPod or a PowerBook or a MacBook Pro or whatever it was, everybody had the same cool.
Right.
If you had an iPad, Warren Buffett had the same iPad. There was no difference.
Right.
Even though he's a rich guy and you're not, that was cool because Apple was cool.
Yeah.
It's like I know Larry Ellison likes Coke,
Right.
the guy from Oracle. He and I are not drinking any different kind of Coca-Cola.
Right.
I like Coca-Cola too. It's the same stuff. The Apple Watch, I think, for the first time presents a problem for Apple. And I'll tell you why. Here you can buy one for $399 or you can buy one for $10,000.
Right.
So there's this social/cultural war going on within their own product set for the first time. So you and I actually don't have the same Apple Watch, do we?
That's true. And you know what's scary about those things? You invest, say, $500 in that watch. In 3 years, it's out of date. It won't work. It will not function, update. They will push you out and force you to upgrade.
God bless you, Jody.
Update.
The forced obsolescence, that's all it is another tool to force obsolescence on you.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. Now, I don't want to, again, I think it's a cool thing. I got one from my Samsung phone. I had a Gear for a long time. You're welcome to it. I no longer have a Gear phone. It's another show. It's another podcast. What cell phone to buy? But in that regards, I found it to be useful to gear when I was driving. Because you're right. You could very easily look at your wrist and know exactly who is contacting you. You could be updated to anything. You didn't have to take your eye off the road.
Right.
Now, to me, the true cool is a heads-up display, either in your rearview mirror or somewhere off to the right of your windshield,
Right.
that when your cell phone has a note, a text, an SMS, an email, it actually comes up on your...
Right. It'll bring it up.
It brings it up in a heads-up display, so you can see it in your...
Through your Bluetooth, it will...
it'll light up your windshield. And I would really like to figure out, how to do this smartwatch in a mechanical way, which we may talk about next week as more and more players, Tag Heuer, come into focus who are doing it with a mechanical.
Okay.
They're putting a little capacitor in there, and the rotor is actually charging up a little battery inside the watch, which again brings us back to, well, you're going to have to change that battery. Sorry. I went a little Colossus there. Hey, Pa! Looks like your Warwick's not going to gas down. Sorry. It's funny, when the cell phone rings, it sounds an awful lot like the show theme.
That's true.
You know about this, Pa? Sorry. It's a little off topic. So, Samsung, I thought, did a great job on their Gear. Very, very pleased with it. Fantastic, but not for me. The Apple Watch, I think, presents a problem when it comes to the class warfare. It brings There's a couple of other makers. Have you seen some of the other watches that have come out?
I have seen some. There's some that have a round face on them. I don't know the brand or anything, but I think there's a lot of companies jumping on board with that new fad.
Yeah, there's a lot of the wearable space. What phone do you have? Do you have an iPhone?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. But no, you're not interested in the Apple Watch.
I don't feel that I need it. I think it would just be a novel expense. I don't see the value in buying it.
Yeah, it took, obviously as a timepiece evaluator, it was my responsibility to have one and wear one for a while. But that said, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not, I was always wearing another watch. It was stupid. I'd have my mechanical, lovely artisan timepiece on my left wrist and Samsung television.
And it's handmade. There's a beautiful quality within that.
Yeah. I'll tell you, if that gear with its beautiful screen could like put the TV on there, like if it was truly Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
Hey, Jody, meet me at the stand. I got my 5% off card.
FaceTime on your watch.
Yeah. If I could FaceTime on the watch, now, even if it needs the phone in my pocket, now they got me. It's got a little camera in there. I could talk to it. It did Bluetooth.
Yeah.
It was enough already. Whatever.
Yeah.
So, as far as wearables go, I think Jody and I are in agreement. Please have your wearable, but don't tell us that you're unhappy that you have to upgrade it every 18 months because we're not going to feel it. And everybody already knows, because they've heard me rail, how I feel about the forced obsolescence of the Mac brand. Now my MacBook Air is starting to lock up on me for no reason.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's another show also, right? All right, Jody and I are off to Switzerland. We're very happy you joined us this afternoon. Have a beautiful leap year, because it is leap year month. I'm sorry, perpetual calendar month, year, leap.
So 3:00 tomorrow morning, you'll be...
I'll be watching. I'll be staring. I'd like to thank you for joining me on Watch Geek Time. My name is Scott Goldman. My partner in crime is Jody.
Thanks for having me.
A pleasure, Jeff. Join us next week when our guest will be watch collector Harry Shearer and watchmaker Ludovic Ballaward. This is the Watch Geek Time Hour on the Watch Geek Time podcast. You can catch us live Saturdays from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time on WatchGeekTime.com.